All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. My name is Nick Koberstein, and I am the math teacher in residence at NumWorks. I joined NumWorks this year after teaching high school mathematics for the past 9 years, and I'm very excited to be with all of you tonight to share all the great features available on the NumWorks graphing calculator. We are recording tonight's session, and we will have it available online for future reference. Here is our agenda for tonight's webinar. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about who we are, and then we'll dig into the design of the calculator, and I'll highlight some common features of each of the apps. And we'll end the webinar with some resources and some offers, as well as answering any questions we might have. There's also going to be a survey at the end of the session. Your feedback is incredibly valuable and would be greatly appreciated. There's also an opportunity on the survey to request a certificate of completion for any educators needing documentation of attendance. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and take a look at your phone. Can you imagine using the phone that you had 10 years ago? I mean, some of us aren't even using the phones that we had last year. That's because the technology in our phones changes drastically each year. And yet, the graphing calculators in a lot of our math classes have not changed, in some cases, in decades. But why would they when those calculator changes have only evolved really cosmetically and in minor ways? Well, this is where NumWorks steps up. We wanted to give a fresh take on those devices that we've been using for years. Our goal was to create an intuitive device that brings simplicity into the classroom. And the outcome? Well, you can now spend less time teaching how to use the technology and more time focusing on actually teaching the mathematics. NumWorks is a startup that's based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we've been in operation in the US for almost 2 years. In addition to being one of the most affordable handheld devices on the market, we also offer a free online emulator. There's no downloads, registration, licenses, or installation required. You can just hop on to numworks.com/simulator, and you have a fully working exact copy of the software on your device. It's the ideal tool for class presentations and for remote learning, but it's also a great way to make sure you can provide access to devices for all of your students. And if you're worried about an internet connection, in addition to the online version, you can download the simulator to your laptop and find the app on your Apple and Android devices. So we're now going to turn our attention to the calculator. If you have a calculator, I recommend having it out so you can follow along. If you've not had a chance to get one just yet, I encourage you to check out that simulator or the phone app. Otherwise, just feel free to follow along with me. So it is important to recognize that the students in today's classrooms are from a technological world. Technology is used in all other aspects of their lives. However, often there's a divide between their real world and the math world, and outdated technology only makes that divide wider. Integrating devices that students are used to is a natural way for students to engage in the mathematics. With a familiar app-based interface and easy-to-navigate menus, students can learn to use the calculator quickly so that they can focus their time learning the math. And the keyboard on the NumWorks calculator was built to match popular gaming controllers. Students find the keyboard design natural to use, and it enables them to work more efficiently. If you take a closer look at the keyboard design, you'll see it's arranged in 3 different zones. At the bottom, we have our basic functions. Here you'll find the number pad along with your basic operations like addition and subtraction. In the middle, we have our more advanced functions, which include commonly used operations and values like pi and the complex number I. This zone is also home to the variables and toolbox keys, which we'll discuss a little bit further later. And at the top, we have the navigation zone, which allows us to select apps and options. So we're going to dig into each of the apps, and I'm going to demonstrate some of the commonly used features of each. If you have any questions about an app, please don't hesitate to ask them in the comments in the chat section. Emma is with us tonight as a moderator, and she'll be happy to answer any questions directly. So we're going to begin with the calculation app. So within the calculation app, you can perform a variety of computations involving complex numbers, matrices, trigonometry, combinatorics, even derivatives and integrals, and unit conversions. So from the home screen, I'm going to click the OK button to open the calculation application. It's the first application on the home screen. And I'm going to start by just adding 1/6 and 1/2. So 1 divided by 6 plus 1 divided by 2. And I'll hit execute. And our calculation is now viewable in our calculation history above the editor. And you notice that we receive both the exact result as well as a decimal approximation. And you should also notice that the exact result will be reduced for us. Now let's go ahead and evaluate cosine of 30 degrees. So right now the calculator's default mode is in degree mode. We can see this in the top left corner. So I'm going to evaluate cosine of 30. Notice that in addition to the exact and decimal approximation results, you'll also often find some additional results. So if we use the navigation keys here to move up into the calculation history, if a line has additional results, you'll get the ellipsis here at the end. So if I navigate over and click OK, we'll see some additional results here. So for a trig operation, those additional results are going to include a unit circle with the angle marked, as well as the sine and cosine values for that angle. So I'll hit the backspace key to get back to the calculation menu, and back one more time to get to the editor. Let's say that we wanted to evaluate 5 plus the square root of negative 20. So 5 plus the square root of negative, and there's only one minus key here, so there's no confusion about which one you need to use. So 5 plus the square root of negative 20. Right now, our calculator is in real mode, which means that we cannot evaluate this complex number, so we just get the output of being unreal. If we want to change that mode, we'll need to go into the settings, which I'll demonstrate now. So if I click the home button, that'll take me back to the main menu, and the settings is an app at the very bottom right corner. So I navigated down and over, and I'll click OK to open the settings. Here is also where you could change that angle measure. Currently it's in degrees. If I wanted to, I could change that to radians. But I'm going to go to complex format, and I'm going to change that from real to Cartesian. So I'm going to go back to my calculation app now. Quickest way to do that would be to press the home button to get back to the main menu. In fact, if I click home again, I go back up to the top, which is right where calculation is. And clicking OK, let's reevaluate this expression. So I could type this in again, but I'm actually going to go up into the navigation history and over and click OK to bring that back down. And now I'll enter that again. And here we get the result 5 plus 2 times the square root of 5i. So both the exact result as well as a decimal approximation. So there are additional functions that can be found in your toolbox, including your absolute value, your nth root, your logarithms, and many other tools in these different submenus, which I'll let you explore on your own. But one thing I do want to look at is our units. Units are a very powerful tool on the NumWorks calculator. Commonly used units can be found for all quantities, including, for example, if we take a look at length, we've got inches, feet, yards, miles, as well as the metric units. We can take a look at those. And we can work directly with units in a calculation. So this is a super powerful tool. If we wanted to, for example, multiply a rate times a time, let's take a look at that. So let's say that I was going 50 meters per second for 30 minutes. I wanted to see how far I ended up. So we can do that directly in the calculation app. So I'm going to do 50 and then meters. So in the toolbox, I'm going to go to my units menu. Meters is a length, it's a metric length. And my rate was 50 meters per second. So I'll divide by seconds. So in the toolbox, we'll go to units, and this time time. And there's my seconds. And as I get comfortable with my units, and I know my abbreviations for our units, we can actually type these directly. So again, I was going to do 50 meters per second times 30 minutes. So I'm going to multiply that by 30 minutes. So I can type this directly. You'll notice that we always have this underscore before a unit. The underscore is the shift option of comma. So shift comma, and then I'm going to type minutes, M-I-N. I'm going to hit alpha to get to the alpha characters. I'm going to actually hit it twice because it's going to lock alpha for me. So I can type M-I-N. And if I enter that, I did a rate times a time. I expect a distance. There's my distance, 55.923 miles. So again, a very powerful tool. In fact, we can convert units as well. So maybe I don't want this to be in miles. Maybe I'm really interested in what this is in feet. Maybe I forget what the conversion is. So I can take this 55 miles, and to convert that, let's take that answer, and I'm going to convert, so shift, and get that, oop, I still have my alpha locked. I'm going to do shift, and then the arrow. If I want to convert this to feet, I'm going to just write after this arrow the units that I'm looking for. So underscore and then feet. So double click alpha to lock it, and then FT. So that 55.9 miles is the same as 295,275 feet. I'm going to wait 1 second there, take a drink of water, and see if there's any questions about that. I know Emma's in the chat answering some questions. All right, so one other thing I want to take a look at in the calculation app is matrices. So matrices can be created again using the toolbox menu. So in my toolbox menu, I'll go down to our matrices and vectors, and this first option creates a new matrix. So I'm going to enter the values of a matrix using the number keys. So I'll do a 2x2 matrix here. I'll do 1 and 5 in the top row. The gray boxes are all optional values. So if I wanted to add a third column, I could navigate over and add one, but it's not required. I'm looking for a 2x2. So I'm going to come down and make my second row be 3. Now here I've got a yellow square because that is required to fill in. In order to have a complete matrix, I need a value there. I'm going to do -1. So we can also create a matrix without the toolbox key, just using our Shift E to the X. So that Shift key is another way to create that. So in fact, if I wanted to take this matrix that I had before and multiply it by another matrix, instead of going into the toolbox, I can also hit Shift, and then let's multiply this by a 2x1 matrix. So we'll multiply this by -3, 2. So matrix multiplication is very simple. There's a lot of other matrix operations within that menu of the toolbox. Again, I'll let you explore that on your own, but you can find like the inverse matrix, the identity matrix, all those values. Lastly, one last thing, any values that you do in the calculation app can be stored and then referenced later, including matrices. So if I wanted to store this previous matrix, let me bring that back down. I'm going to store that. Let's use the capital letter A, so Shift Alpha A. And we can also store just numbers. So my favorite number is 13. And we're not really restricted to just single letters. So I'm going to store this as my name. So this will be stored as Nick, N-I-C-K. If I want to access these values later, I'll just click the variables key. And those expressions can be found there. So if I wanted to take my expression, my variable Nick, and multiply it by 2, Nick times 2 is now 26. So this is great also because this works across the different apps. So if we have a function defined in our functions app, f of x is x squared, I could call that function in the calculation app and evaluate f of 7. So I could do 7 squared. So that's a really great feature as well. All right, so we're going to move now to our next app. I want to take a look at the Equations app. With the Equations app, you can solve equations and systems of equations with both exact and numerical solutions. So to enter the Equations app, what we'll do is we'll go back to the home screen, the main menu, by clicking the home button and navigate over to Equations and click OK. So let's start with just a simple equation. To add an equation, we'll click OK on Add an Equation. We've got these templates here that we can use, or we can start from scratch by just using an empty template. And so for this example, I'm going to start from scratch. So I'll click OK here. And I'm going to enter the equation 3x minus 7 equals 12. So 3, I do have a convenient variable key here, x. 3x minus 7 equals is shift pi equals 12. If I navigate down to solve the equation, I can now solve this equation. So I'm looking for the value of x that makes this equation true, and that value is x equals 19/3, or approximately 6.333. If I hit the back button, I can clear this out, and we can also do systems of equations. So I'm going to do a system of equation this time. That just means I need to add at least 2 equations. I'll do that the same way. So I will click OK. I'm going to use the template this time. I'm going to use my x plus y equals 0 template just to save me from having to use the alpha key. So I'm going to let this one be 5x plus 3y equals 7. 5x plus 3y equals 7. If I want to add another equation to make this a system, I navigate down and click OK. I'm going to use that same template again. And this time I'm going to do negative 2x. Again, we just have this one minus key, so there's no confusion about which one you need to use, and equals negative 4. So again, I'm doing negative 2x plus y equals negative 4. So now, because I have two equations, we know this is a system of equations. We see our bracket here, and you'll also notice that at the bottom this says solve the system. So navigate down and click OK, and here's that ordered pair for my solution. X equals 19/11 and y equals negative 6/11 would make this system true. All right, finally, we can also solve a quadratic equation. So let me click that back button. I'll clear these out and add an equation, clicking OK. I've got this quadratic template to make it just a little bit more convenient to use. I'm actually going to keep this one just as it is. I'm not going to add any different coefficients. This one actually does not have any real solutions. These solutions will be complex, but since we already switched our calculator to the complex mode, we will get those complex solutions. So go down to solve the equation. Here I've got my two solutions, and I can confirm that these are going to be complex. We can see our discriminant here is negative 3. Now, if I had not switched this to complex mode earlier, then I would only have the discriminant show up here, and it would tell me that there were no real solutions. So I could then switch the mode if I wanted to see those real solutions. All right, that's the Equations app. Sorry about that. All right, let's move over to the Functions app. Now with the Functions app, you can plot the graph of functions and polar and parametric curves. You can discover key features of your graphs. You can consult a table of values and compare derivatives and integrals. So I'm going to move over. Let's make that a little bit bigger here. To get to the Functions app, we'll click that Home button, and we will move over to Functions and click OK. So we're going to start by entering two functions. So to add a function, just like with the Equations app, we'll click OK here to add a function. And I'm going to let f of x be the quadratic function x squared minus 15. So I've got x squared minus 15. And then I'll navigate down and click OK. I'm going to add another function. We're going to let g of x be the linear function 3x plus 4. 3x plus 4. So to view the graph of these functions, we can either navigate up and over to the Graph tab, or we can navigate down to Plot the Graph and click OK. And you'll notice here that we have this auto zoom that's currently turned on. I can tell it's turned on by this yellow circle. So the auto zoom was engineered to provide a display that best showcases the interesting characteristics of a graph, including your x-intercepts and your extrema. And you can adjust the graph using the axes menu up and over here. So if we click OK, this is going to open up our axes menu. So if we wanted to not use the auto zoom, if I wanted to say have the negative 10 to 10 for x, negative 10 to 10 for y screen, I can adjust those values in here. I'll turn off the auto and adjust that minimum for x to negative 10. And I'll do the same thing for y. I'll adjust that from negative 10 to 10. And I'll confirm that. So here is a standard window that many of us are used to. And you'll see here that there's a little bit of an issue. We're missing a lot of those interesting characteristics that we would want to see in a graph. So I don't see that second intersection. I'm not seeing my extrema. So this auto zoom is a really fantastic way to get a really good picture right away. And if I want to go back to that, I can actually just come right up here to auto and click OK. And I've got this fantastic view. We can also navigate around the graph very easily. If we go up and over to navigate, and click OK. We'll have some directions here at the beginning. We can pan, we can zoom in and out using plus and minus. So I can use the navigation keys to move over and to the left and up and down. If I want to zoom in here and take a closer look at something, we can do that as well. And hitting the back key is going to just give us back to that main screen. And if I want to go back to that classic auto zoom, I can click OK on that. Now the calculus menu is the fourth option up here. It's going to be where you can find intersections and zeros and extremas and other interesting characteristics. So for example, let's find the zeros of the quadratic function. So if I click OK on calculus, because I have more than one function here, I need to let the calculator know which function I'm interested in. So I'm interested in the zeros of the quadratic function. So I'll click OK. And I want to calculate the zeros. So I'm going to click OK on the zeros, and right away I'm going to find those zeros. I don't need to tell the calculator left bound, right bound, like where I'm looking. It's going to find my zeros for me. And if there's more than one, I can simply use my navigation keys to toggle between those two options. So I've got my zeros at x equals negative 3.87 and positive 3.87. Similarly, we can find intersection points just as easy. If we back out of this and go to calculate or calculus, I'm going to look for the intersections of these two functions. It doesn't matter which one I select. If I had a third function, I would want to make sure I select one of the two functions I was interested in. So I'll click this quadratic again, and I want to calculate the intersection. And again, automatically finds that intersection. I can navigate between the two. One very important thing to note here, we can only find the intersections that are in the current window. So if I had zoomed in and I wasn't looking at that rightmost intersection, it's only going to find the intersections within the current zoom, the current window. So you will want to adjust your graph as needed if they're outside of that window. For any calculus teachers out there, you can also find lines tangent to the curve and compute integrals. So I'll just show a quick example of that. So if we wanted to find if we wanted to talk about the tangent line to the quadratic function here at a point, I can go into that quadratic function and I can calculate. I'll come down here to tangent, and I think this is a really awesome feature. It's going to plot a tangent line onto the curve at a point. I can actually move that point around. This is a great way to explore what's happening to the slope or to the derivative. F prime is given to us right here, and we can see what's happening to that derivative at different points. So I think that's a really cool feature to really see what's happening. If you're interested in derivatives, but you don't want the actual tangent line, you can also just toggle on the derivative, which is going to give us the derivative value at a point. So there's my derivative there. I know that might have been a little quick. We're actually going to have an advanced features of the NumWorks webinar in 2 weeks from today, where we'll spend a little bit more time talking about tangent lines and integrals, as well as some of the like matrices and unit conversions. So that's something to look forward to. All right. Last thing just on here, we've got the table. Table is exactly what you'd expect. If you go to the table tab, we have for some x values, the output of the f of x function and g of x function. Right now, the default, we've got 0 to, I believe, 10 for x. We can easily set that interval to any value we would want. So maybe I want to go negative 10 to 10 and see those outputs there. If I'm just interested in an x value, I can actually just type in an x value anywhere I'd like. So maybe I want to know what happens at 50. So type in 50, and I can get those outputs of my two functions. And that is a little breakdown of the Functions app. I did mention that we can do some parametric and polar curves. I'll just show a quick example of that. We do not need to go to settings and change the mode. We can actually just do that directly here right away. So I'm going to clear these out, add a new function. Before I type the function, I'm going to actually back out of this function because I want to change this function type. So before I type anything for the function, I'm backed out. I'm going to navigate over to f of x and click OK, because that's going to open up my function options. Right now, the curve type by default is your Cartesian function. If we click OK, we can switch that over to the polar function. And so if I wanted to graph 3 sine of 4 theta, I'm going to use the x and t key here to get my theta value. And we can plot that graph. I will need to adjust that zoom. And there's a beautiful polar curve for you. You can graph a linear curve on top of this if you'd like. If you're trying to find the area between some values, that could be an interesting feature. Okay, let's take a look now at our next app. That next app is actually going to start our discussion about statistics and data analysis. So we have 3 apps currently that discuss statistics and data analysis. This first one is simply called Statistics. With the Statistics app, you can study one variable data set and view summary statistics. So we can view box and whisker plots and histograms of those data sets. Again, this is focusing on your one variable data sets. So let me make that calculator a little bit bigger. I'm going to click the home button to return to the home screen and navigate down to statistics. Clicking OK to open the statistics app. The very first tab is your data tab. This is where we're going to enter some data. I've already entered some values. We'll say it's from a recent quiz along with the frequency for those grades. So I had 1 student with an 89 and 5 students with a 91. You can, of course, fill in 5 91s in the first column if you'd like to, like if you're entering test grades and you don't want to find out how many 91s you have. You can keep those frequencies all as one. So let's take a look at some graphical displays of this data. So I'm going to navigate up and over to the histogram tab and click OK. So here's my histogram. I can go up to my histogram settings and adjust this slightly if I wanted to. So instead of a bin width of 5, maybe I want a bin width of 2. And I can use my navigation keys to get into those different bins and find the frequencies and the relative frequencies. If I move up and go over to the box tab, that's going to give me my box and whisker plot. So navigating left and right is going to show my 5-number summary here in the legend. So I've got my minimum, my Q1, median, Q3, and maximum. And then lastly, the stats tab is going to give us our summary statistics for that data set. Back on the data tab, we can have more than one data set, so we can have up to 3. Let's say that I had these quiz scores and I wanted to give everybody 5 points back. So I could manually calculate all of these scores and add 5 to them, but we can also fill in a column with a formula. So in V2, if I navigate up and click OK, I can fill this column with the formula. So I want to take the values of V1 and add 5. I want V2 to be V1 plus 5. So I'm going to hit Shift Alpha to do a capital V1 to call V1 plus 5. And that's going to fill in V2 with V1's values plus 5. And then the frequencies right now are all just 1. I want those frequencies to be the same thing they were before. So I will also fill this with a formula. This formula will simply be that N2 is going to be equal to N1. So Shift Alpha N1. When we have more than one data set, we can easily compare the distributions using those histogram and box plot tabs. So if I go over to histogram, I can talk about how these distributions compare to each other. Of course, this is just going to be a shift since all I did was add 5. But that's a great way to quickly view on the same scale the distributions of 2 data sets. And again, the stats tab is now going to show me the statistical summary values for both data sets. So what does adding 5 do to your summary statistics? Great discussion. The next, The next statistical app is going to be the regression app. So if we wanted to analyze the relationship between 2 quantitative variables, we're going to use the regression app. With the regression app, we can display the relationship between 2 quantitative variables with a scatter plot. We can measure the linear association with the correlation and determine the equation of the regression line and in other models. So let's make this calculator a bit bigger. Click the home button, and I'm going to move over to the regression app. On the first tab, once again, I have the data tab. This is where we enter some data, and I've already entered just an example set of values here. Once the data is entered, you can navigate up and over to your graph tab, and you're going to see right away a scatter plot as well as a linear regression. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll find several outputs, including the equation of your linear model. So y equals ax plus b. Here are the coefficients a and b, as well as your correlation coefficient and your coefficient of determination. Using the navigation keys, the left and right keys, you can move between the values of that data set that we entered. And we can also see the mean of x and the mean of y as one of those points. And then depending on where your point is relative to the model, you'll either be able to move up or move down to the model. So for example, when x was 32, the output was 15. That is below what the model would predict based off of this data set. So if I navigate up to the model, I can see the predicted value is 21.03. On the other hand, if I was over here at x equals 35, that actually has a value that was above the model. So if I navigate down to the model, I can see its predicted value. The tabs up here are very similar to the functions app, but the regression app is another way where you can, another place to find predictions. So we've got predictions given x. So if I wanted to know what the prediction was based off of the model when x was, let's say 30, then I can see that predicted value here. The regression tab is also where maybe we determine that a linear model might not be the best fit. So if I wanted to try a different regression model, I could click OK and go to regression and change that from linear to, let's say, quadratic, and take a look at that and get its model here, its equation. Stats tab, very similar to the stats app, is going to give you some summary statistics for your data set. So for x and for y, you've got your mean and your sum, and we can also get the coefficients of our model here. So the last one I had was quadratic, which is why the regression model for the quadratic is showing here. Oh, that's me. Too big. All right. So the last statistics app is the probability app. And with the probability app, you can compute probabilities using one of several distributions, including the binomial and the geometric and the normal and the t-distribution, as well as many others. So I'll bring that calculator back up. We'll click that home button, go over to probability. So again, here, when we first open it, we get a list of distributions. I'm going to actually go into the binomial distribution. Once a distribution is selected, you'll have to enter its relevant parameters. So for the binomial distribution, that's going to include the number of trials in and the probability of success p. So we can give some context to this. Let's assume that we are going to flip a coin 20 times, where the probability of getting a heads is 0.5. So we can use these default values for our example. So after selecting next, or entering different values if you'd like, you'll see a visual of the binomial distribution here at the bottom, as well as a probability statement at the top. Right now, it's calculating the probability that x is less than or equal to 0. So you have 0 coins that were head. But let's say that I wanted to find the probability that I had no more than 8 coins head, 8 coins that were flipped as heads. So I'm looking for the probability that x is less than or equal to 8. Well, I need to enter an 8 here in this probability statement. It's already highlighted for me, so I can just use 8 and enter that, and I see that the probability is 0.25, and if we look below, the distribution is actually shaded for us, so that corresponding area is given to us. Well, what if I wanted to find the probability that x was, for example, greater than or equal to 8, or between two values, or maybe even just equal to 8? It's a great question. We can navigate over to this icon where the area is shaded to the left and click OK, and we have 3 other options. So we were on less than or equal to, we could do between two values, greater than or equal to, or equal to a value. So let's say I wanted to find the probability that x was equal to 8. So I could come over and enter an 8 there and get the probability of 0.12. So I'm going to go back actually to the distribution list. Let's take a look at the normal distribution. For the normal distribution, we need to enter a mean and a standard deviation. For this example, I'll use a mean of 128 and a standard deviation of 12. And I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to work backwards. So instead of trying to find the area to the left or right or between, I actually want to figure out what value is at the 90th percentile. So I'm looking for what value of x has 90% of the area to the left. So before we entered a value in for x and we got a probability, well, now I know the probability. I know the area to the left is 0.9. So I'm going to navigate over and put 0.9 and enter that. And now I've done my inverse operation. I've found the x value that corresponds to that area. So if x was 143, that's going to give me an area to the left. And just like before, I could navigate over if I wanted the area to the right of a value, or for example, if I'm looking for the middle percentage. So if I'm looking for the middle 68% of this population, this distribution, we can see that that's going to take place between 116 and 140. And for my stats people out there, you'll hopefully recognize that we're one standard deviation above and one standard deviation below the mean to get that middle 68%. All right. A couple apps left here. So we're going to transition away from the probability and statistics apps and take a look at the sequence app. With the sequence app, you can plot recursive and explicit sequences. You can view a table of values and compute the sum of terms. Bring that calculator back up. We'll click the home button, and I'm going to navigate down and over to sequences and click OK. Very similar to the functions app here. First thing I'm going to do is add a sequence. I'll add a sequence by clicking OK. And we have a couple sequence types that we can select from. So we could do an explicit expression or a recursive first or second order. I'm going to start with a recursive first order. So I'll click OK here. And I need to enter a recursive expression as well as a first term. So for my recursive expression, I'm going to let un plus 1 be equal to, we'll do 67% of un plus 150. And my initial term will start with 200. Navigating down, I can plot this graph, or plot this sequence here. And that's going to give me, if I use these arrow keys, I can move along the sequence and see the value of each term. So for the 7th term, I have that the value was 439. So using those left and right values here, or arrows. If I hit the back key, let's actually, too many times. Let's go back up to sequences, the sequences tab. I'll clear this sequence out. Let's do a an explicit sequence expression this time. So I'm going to let this be un equals 1 over 2 to the nth power. We'll plot this sequence. Again, I can use my left and right arrow keys here to see the value of the term. Up at the top, we've got our zooms and our navigate again. If I go to calculus, here we can actually calculate the sum of terms. So let's say that I wanted to find the sum of the first 5 terms. So I click OK. I'm going to select my first term so I can navigate over if I want the first 5 terms to the 0th term. And then I could navigate over here to 5. I can actually just type in the value too if I want the 5th term there to be the last. And I see the sum of those values. I guess this is actually 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first 6 values is about 1.96. If I wanted a very large value here to see what's happening, I could enter a very large value to see what this sum is approaching. And then, of course, the table tab. Well, sorry. There we go. The table tab is going to give you the value of the term for an nth term. We can set the interval just like we did with the functions app. We can also just enter, if I want to know what the 15th term is, I can enter that value. All right, there's one more app I would like to discuss. So the Python app. The Python app is a very powerful feature. We are excited to be able to say that NumWorks was the first handheld calculator to offer Python back in 2017. While others have followed suit, we do believe that our device will give you the best experience. And I'm not going to go too deep into Python for this session, but I do hope to host some Python-specific webinars in the near future. And for today, I'm just going to simply show some of the preloaded scripts and how to use them. So I'll click the home button here, and I'm going to navigate over to Python. Click OK. So currently the calculator does come with several scripts already loaded onto your calculator. I want to take a look at the polynomial script. So if you click OK on the name of a script, it's going to open the script up for editing. This is a great way to just see sort of what's already done, a great way to learn about programming by seeing a program that's already written, a script that's already written for you. So like for this script, for example, we are defining a function. We're going to define the function roots. It's going to have 3 inputs, A, B, and C. This is actually the coefficients of a quadratic. So the goal of this function or this program is to find the roots of a quadratic expression. So we're going to calculate the discriminant, which we're calling delta. And based off of the value of the discriminant, we will compute and return the roots. So if I back out of the script, I can actually run this script. If I navigate over to these ellipses and click OK, that gives you the option to execute the script. Now, when we do this, nothing happens immediately because we haven't called this function. All we've done is imported all the stuff from this script into our shell. If I want to call this function, any function already defined will be in your variable tab. So we click variables, we see that roots function. So let's say that I wanted to find the roots of the quadratic expression 2x squared plus 9x plus 7. So the coefficients are 2, 9, 7. I see that those roots are -3.5 and -1. You can write new scripts directly on the calculator. You can add a new script and type directly in here, but you can also create scripts online and load them onto your calculator using your NumWorks account. So using my.numworks.com. In fact, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about everything that's available for you on your NumWorks account. So I'm going to pull back up my notes here. So again, that's my.numworks.com. And we see here that what we can do once we're logged in is we can access our scripts. So by logging in or creating a NumWorks account, you can access your Python scripts. You'll have your name up here at the top for a drop-down box, and there'll be My Scripts. And once you click on that, you'll have access to some scripts that you maybe have already created, the ones that are already there. You can view them, you can edit them, and there's also that button there to load to the calculator. When you're logged into your account, you can also save your simulator session. So earlier in the session, I mentioned that we had a free online emulator. If you're logged in, you can save those sessions to prepare something maybe for your class and share them with others. Also online, we just released several classroom resources. So for some different subjects, you can find a few activities that I think you'll really enjoy in your classes. They involve both a student version and a teacher version, and that you can print off, as well as like an answer key for you online. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat at the same time and trying to make sure I'm taking care of everything. I think Emma and Roman are taking care of everybody. And then also on mynumworks.com, this is probably the most important thing, is that this is how you keep your calculator updated. We release updates regularly. The NumWorks calculator is highly adaptive. So we hear back some features that people are interested in, and we are happy to be able to make a lot of new features available. There's no extra software required. You just log in, you plug in, and you go. So you can see here on this screen that I actually have 2 calculators that are outdated. So if you just log in right now and you go to My Devices, if you see that X, that means you do not have the latest software. That means you're missing out. So you want to make sure you don't have X's there. You want to make sure you have check marks. So once you plug in and just simply click Update, you should have a nice check mark there, and that means you are good to go. In fact, speaking of updates, we are very excited to announce that version 17 is right around the corner. There will be a new beta version of the NumWorks software to try very soon, and you might ask what's different? Well, this is probably the most impressive and fun update yet. We've included many features that you've asked for, and if you want a little sneak peek, I've got a couple screenshots here on this slide that you can get an idea of what we're going to be releasing soon. If you want to try it for yourself once it's available, you can follow the link here on the screen. I think it's going in the chat to become a beta tester. That'll allow you first access to it and to be notified when version 17 does come out. We also have some special offers for educators. So if you are a math teacher, you can have a free sample device. We want to make sure that you have a chance to try it out and see what you think. We do believe it's going to be one of the easiest devices to learn. We also offer educator discounts. So if you're not teaching if you're not a math teacher, certified math teacher, we do still offer educator discounts as well as some bulk order discounts. Emma is going to put that link in the chat for you. And if you have any questions about that, you can contact us, and we'll be able to get you some more information about that. If you're looking for if your school or your department is interested in just getting a training, either similar to this one or very specific, please reach out to us. We would love to do some workshops with you, whether that's a virtual or an in-person thing, depending on your location. We would love to support you in that way. So we got a bit of time left here. So what I wanted to do was just make sure you had a chance to ask any questions in the chat while we're all here. You can always contact us with questions. We'll put that contact information in the chat as well. But this is a great time to ask questions. And what I'm going to do while we're asking questions in the chat is there's a survey. I'd love for you to take a moment, if you want to take a moment now, to complete this survey. Again, your feedback is very, very helpful in letting us know what went well as just like what topics you'd like in the future. If a different time of day is better for you, you can let us know that too. But also, if you are an educator looking for like a CEU credit or something, we do have some just completion or certificates of completion that we can create for you. So that there's a little option for you to say that you're interested in that. If you have by chance changed your school, please let us know. Please send us an email or update that even in your account, because we're going to pull that information on your certificate. So we want to make sure that's up to date for you. If you happen to have an email address that's not correct, if it's like you've changed schools, send us an email so we can update that for you. So again, that survey is there for you. You will have to be logged in to do that. So if you haven't had a chance to create an account, this is a great time to do that. Again, the floor is just open for any questions. You can drop those in the chat. I'm going to pause just for a moment to let some questions come in and to let you take that survey. If you don't have a question and you've already done the survey, I absolutely want to thank you for spending the evening with me. Here's my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, I'm the math teacher in residence. I have classroom experience. So if there's something very specific that you're doing in your class and you'd like to know how the calculator can help you or what feature you might use, please feel free to reach out to me. If you're looking for a training or a workshop, I'd love to help you with that.